Christian Parenting.
Today, I have a topic that I have never discussed in my life, Generation Alpha. I'm joined today by Janine McNally, and we discuss the early characteristics that are emerging from the next generation of children that's already in many of our households, Generation Alpha. Hi, I'm Jay Holland, and this is Let's Parent on Purpose, a podcast to enrich your parenting, marriage, and personal walk with Jesus. Personally, I'm the father of 4 and a family and student pastor still in the middle of my parenting journey. Each week that you join me, we will invest in the long-term thriving of our families centered around Jesus. If this is helpful to you, subscribe or follow, share it with a friend, and get the extra benefit of my weekly enrichment content through my Things for Thursday email by texting the word THINGS to 66866. And finally, you can catch all of the past archives at www.letsparentonpurpose.com. It was really just in the last couple of weeks that I wrapped up a series on the challenges of parenting Generation Z when I met a lady who introduced me to a topic that I have not even honestly given any thought to yet, and that's the generation after Gen Z, which I don't even know if I acknowledge they existed yet, and it turns out I've got one of them in my household. Gen Alpha is the generation born between 2010 and 2024, so some of those babies are still not even here yet, but Gen Alpha would essentially be our babies, toddlers, and elementary age kids. And that's the next generation that we get to parent. I have honestly, as a generation, thought nothing about them, although I think about those kids all the time. I'm a parent of one of them, youth and children's pastor, get to love on many of them each week. But it is really wild to think that we are on to another generation already. I met Janine McNally first through just an email correspondence. She's been attending my church some here at Covenant Fellowship. Originally a high school teacher in her native Australia, Janine McNally is the founder and director of Grace for Kids, which is a nonprofit that works to produce gospel-centered resources. In her spare time, she's a writer, professor, and doctoral student. Yeah, spare time. And has just completed her first book, When You See the Fireflies, Equipping Parents and Leaders to Minister Effectively to Generation Alpha. She's been involved in over 40 years of children's ministry, as well as pastoral and church planting ministry alongside her husband. Janine and I have a conversation about just the front end of research of Generation Alpha. What are some of the ways that they're distinct? What are some of the particular parenting challenges that they might face? And finally, how are we going to disciple this generation? What are some things that we really need to think about, to safeguard them from, to focus on? What are the ways that we need to creatively get Jesus into this generation? Again, every conversation that we have about generation is broad generalizations. Every person is unique and different, and especially on the front end of generations, and especially as they're little, it's hard to understand everything about them. But I thought this was a fascinating conversation, one to kind of wet your whistle for something that I'm sure that you will think through and wrestle through as your Gen Alpha kids and grandkids grow into young men and women. So enjoy my conversation with Janine today. If you want to find out more about her or get her new book, Fireflies, Equipping Parents and Leaders to Minister Effectively to Generation Alpha, you can do that at graceforkids.org. That's GRACE, the number 4, KIDZ.org. I'll have that link in my show notes. Enjoy this conversation with Janine and give me an email. Let me know what you think about it. Janine, thanks so much for joining us on Let's Parent on Purpose. It's a treat to get to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, you're going to have to identify your accent for all of our listeners so that they don't spend the whole podcast trying to figure that out.
I was born and raised in Australia, Melbourne, and moved over here in 1991 to do my master's degree at Dallas Seminary.
Wow. All right. So was the accent stronger in Australia, or you just kind of dialed in for the rest of your life?
Well, it's funny. My family all think I'm a traitor and that I sound American. And I said, no, what it is you have to adopt the vocabulary to be understood. And my brother, who gives me the hardest time, he was just here recently, and we went to a restaurant. He goes, "Gosh, no one understands what I'm saying." I said, "Exactly. Now multiply that by 30 years, and you'll realize why I, quote, sound American." Even
you just
though
know how to
my
speak
accent,
American, right? Yeah.
I know how to speak American, exactly.
Right. Well, I'm from West Virginia, and the same thing kind of has to happen when you move out of Appalachia. You have to develop a new vocabulary. But somewhere along the way, I lost my accent. When I'm tired or talking to grandparents, I can pick it back up. But
there you go.
In general, it's rough. But it kind of helps you to sound credible to the rest of the world to not speak like a West Virginian. So, hey, when you contacted me about the book you have coming out and the research that you did, I realized I am swimming in Generation Z right now. I'm the parent of four Gen Z children, and I'm a youth pastor, and my entire youth group at this point is Gen Z.
Correct.
And so I have given no thought to what's coming next, but it's coming really quickly. Like in the next couple of years, I'm going to be a youth pastor of the next generation. And I don't even think I had thought through what they're being called or if they're being called anything yet. So I am really intrigued about our conversation today. Generation Alpha, right? Is that, at least for now, that's the placeholder name?
Correct.
And I was just curious, what motivated you to begin researching and to finding out about Gen Alpha?
So I'm a professor at the school where I'm doing my doctorate. And so I was preparing, they asked me to teach a couple of classes on children's ministry. So I was preparing those, and just like all professors, I thought I'll just turn this into a book. And so I started putting things in chapters and stuff. And as I was doing that, I thought this is going to be really boring. Everybody's already written books on children's ministry. So I just continued to research and pray. And I was reading an article from somebody in, I don't even remember what it was, some obscure country. And down the very bottom, it was on Generation Alpha. And down the very bottom was this footnote talking about Generation Alpha. I'm like, who is Generation Alpha? And the guy that the footnote was about was a guy by the name of Mark McCrindle. He happens to be an Aussie. He is a social demographer. Is that how you say it? Demographic researcher.
I told you I'm from West Virginia. I don't know.
Yeah. And so he has been studying this generation in Australia. And so I contacted them and I said, your research statistics, do you think they're the same as what we have over here in the States? And have you done anything with regard to churches and children's ministry? He is a Christian, and but he said, no, I haven't done anything like that. And I'm like, yes, that's my book right there. No one is talking about them, and they're already there. They're already here. They were born in 2010 through 2024. So the youngest have yet to be born, but the oldest are already 12 going on 13 years old. And so they're here already.
My goodness. So that means, actually, I said I was a parent of 4 Gen Z kids. My youngest is 11.
Jennifer, that's an Alpha.
Oh, come on. I got to learn a new generation. Okay. Well, let's get to it because I need to know this now. Tell me at least high level, and obviously we know that every characteristic of every generation, not all of it applies to any individual, and especially on these front end and tail ends, there's a lot of crossover. So like, again, I think I said I'm Gen X, but I'm at the very tail end of Gen X. Right. I was born in 77. So there's plenty of crossover that I, understand and recognize things from the millennial generation. So the same thing's going to be true. Gen Z and Alpha, it's not yet a clear, distinct break, especially in these early ends. But high level, what would you say are some of the distinctives that researchers are beginning to see about this particular generation?
Yeah, so that's part of the issue, is that as when kids are young, you don't see their characteristics forming immediately until they're a little older. And I think you'll see over the next 10 years more and more people writing about them. But the most obvious one would be that they are the very first generation to ever be born completely into technology. If you ask your kids when they got their first phone, when they got their first iPad, when they first used a laptop, my kids are the top end of Gen Z and millennials, and they got their first computer, and it was all to do with school. Nothing, it wasn't entertainment. Right. There was no social media at the time. That didn't start until they were in their late teens. But these kids are the very first generation. They're completely absorbed in a world of technology. Babies are having iPads thrown into their hands. They are not afraid to touch buttons, and they're completely in touchscreen, so they're always touching things on the screen. Mark McCrindle talks about them being the glass generation because they're always on their devices. They've got the world in their back pockets. I helped at a vacation Bible school last year, and I had kids that were third and fourth graders, and they were walking around with their own phones. And I'm like, wow. And they're not afraid of them, and that's what their world is. So that's probably the biggest.
Yeah, it's not just their own phones, nice phones.
Yes.
Not like the iPhone 6 that's on death's door, but the first or second generation of the latest out there. And that's something that just
Yep.
I marvel at, because my kids can't, if it's not a body part that's attached to them, like their leg or their arm or whatever, they are liable to use it, lose it, or destroy it at any moment in time. And then I am, in our church, I see it, children with $1,000 phones and they, can't do times tables yet.
I know. I only just upgraded mine, and these kids have way better technology than I have.
Yeah, you need better grandparents, I think, is what the deal is. So.
My grandparents are no longer here.
Mine neither. So
yeah.
Okay, so that tech is one. And so interestingly, like even Gen Z, when did you first get your phone or iPad? With this generation, a lot of them are probably not going to be able to remember when did I get it, because they won't remember not having it.
Right.
As it's getting lower and lower, especially with the iPads. Like they might remember when they finally got their first phone, but there's never not been a time with iPads. So just in the same way, like,
Correct.
I always had TV. What are you talking about? When did we get our first TV?
Yeah. So I was at a restaurant the other day with my husband, and there was a table to the left of us with two small children, and the restaurant had provided, the kids menus where you flip them over and there's a coloring sheet. They were sitting there on the table and they had crayons, but the two little girls were playing on their iPads. Which is the way, it's just the way it is now.
Okay. Yeah. And so not surprising that that's the case. What else, do we see as kind of the big picture trends? I have some thoughts on this that I'll throw in there afterwards, because I know some of this is rapidly changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to predict because there's so much that's unpredictable, but I'm curious, what have you guys found so far?
Another thing that has really impacted them, of course, was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So our youngest daughter is 18. She's about to graduate from Colorado Christian University, and she tells us frequently stories about her friends who are all believers, and yet they are struggling with suicide thoughts, cutting, anxiety, depression, terrible things. And I said to her, what is wrong? And she said, well, Mom, look at the world we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And she made a really good point. And these little kids are growing up in a world where they're hearing about school shootings like happened yesterday, and gender issues. Mary becomes Mark, and Christopher's wearing a dress to school, and just being bombarded with all of these weird issues. And right in the middle of the whole thing, along comes COVID. And all of a sudden, these kids are locked in their homes. They can't go and see grandma. Their laptop or iPad now is not just entertainment, it is now their teacher and their educator. And so it has completely turned things around. And we don't know yet the impact that those years of isolation and face masks, what that is going to look like on these kids. But it's had an incredible impact. I'm sure you see it with your Gen Z youth kids. The mental illness issues and just their struggles coming out of a 3-year pandemic like that. So that is a definite issue, I think. And then these little kids with social media and all the issues that go along with that, with the bullying, and now that they can't even come home and escape from that, they walk home and it's in their back pockets with their social media and stuff like that. It's just a tough one. And they say how kids now are more engaged than ever on social media, and yet they are the loneliest.
Mhm.
So they are desperate for relationships, talking to real people, um, not being able to put on a persona on social media that they want, that they choose for themselves, but rather being themselves with real people. So,
Yeah. One of the things that I do think was encouraging post COVID, as a parent with kids locked in the house and, screens everywhere, is you get terrified of like, they're never going to go outside again. And what I've seen on the whole is a lot of these kids just bounce back from it. They got tired of being on their video games. They got tired of doing this stuff. And I've noticed that not just in my household, but even in the testimonies of as our kids go through youth, as they get older, we have them, share their testimonies with the other kids. But a lot of what you're talking about, severe depression, suicidal thoughts, these were very common during that period, extreme isolation. And so,
mhm.
Thank God with the ones that I've interacted with, a lot of them, again, have bounced back from that as they are engaging in genuine community. The question that we don't know is, what is the long-term effect of that in your super formative years as your
Yes.
brain is developing all of its connections?
Mhm.
What is this going to mean now as you go into your adult years, how you handle attachments, how you
Right.
handle stress? What are the things that maybe were ingrained in you during that time? And so, yeah, there's a lot of that really is a mystery, that will be a wait and see.
Yep. Yep. And honestly, I kind of was of the impression that they would bounce back too. And yet, as I communicate with our daughter, she's still in Colorado. Uh, she said 80%, I think she said, of the kids here on campus. I said, can't you find any, quote, normal friends, ones that won't drag you down, hang out with the healthy ones? She said, everybody's struggling with it. Anxiety is
Mm,
through the roof. It's terrible. It honestly, it shocked us
yeah.
that this is a very good Christian university, and yet it's so rampant.
Yeah, I do think even you mentioned a school shooting. So we're taping this. We're in late March, and this is coming out in May. And just in the last day or two was another school shooting in Nashville, and very
Hmm.
likely by the time this comes out, there'll be another one, which is horrific to
Yep.
know about. Um, these kids know about every school shooting that happens anywhere in the nation.
Hmm.
So there's even though our kids don't watch the news because of social media, and they find out about it. So there's that. There's the fact that, um, if they go to a regular school, if they go to a public school, most likely they are walking into some kind of armed fortress at this
Yep.
point.
Hmm.
And you think of just kind of the low level trauma that does to you. And then on
Yep.
top of that, sadly, the indoctrination that's happening at a younger and younger age of
Yes.
just a twisted idea of what it means to be human, a twisted idea of what it means to be
Hmm.
normal, a perverted sexuality, and a denigration of any kind of normalcy in family life.
Yes.
Um, this really is a bombarded generation. And that's just kind of like baseline average of what
Yes.
they're dealing with. And I don't want to paint a doom and gloom scenario, because we could do the same thing for Gen Xers. Like I remember when I was going through and, you know, had to watch the news because my parents had the news on and they were talking about, how we were all going to die and everything was awful and drugs were going to take us all. And it did some, but the Lord did a lot of good stuff. And that's going to be the case for every generation. But I
Yep.
think being aware as a parent that there are a number, even if you don't let your children have social media, even if you have a healthy, safe, intact family, there is a baseline level of trauma and stress that is indicative of growing up in the world and culture that they're in, that your children do have to deal with. And at some point we have to give them the emotional vocabulary to be able to express
Hmm.
that, to identify it and
Yes.
express it. Yeah.
Yep. That's what I
So,
talk about in my book a lot. I start out with the doom and gloom because it's inescapable, and then go on to talk about one of the quotes that I use in my book is the biggest mistake we can make. And the book is primarily for Generation Alpha leaders. So the biggest mistake we can make in children's ministry is to keep repeating the same programs that have in the past been very successful, but we assume that they're going to continue to be successful without reevaluating them for the new generation. So we talk in the book about the doom and gloom it starts with, and then our reactions to that and what we should do and how we need to change the way we are doing things to accommodate for these new kids with these unique characteristics. Yeah.
One of the characteristics we haven't mentioned, and it's so front end, that I actually was listening to a podcast that was talking about technologies that are going to revolutionize the world. And they said, we just started our podcast a year ago, and this is kind of a high level techie podcast. And they said a year ago when we were talking about this stuff, we were talking about cryptocurrency and the metaverse. And now cryptocurrency has, at least for now, busted and nobody's on the metaverse. But what has happened? This artificial intelligence revolution has gone from, you think of ChatGPT, that has gone from 0 to 100 million users faster than Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. And I use it every day for a multiple variety of things. We have no idea. The best thing to say, the best illustration that they gave was, imagine looking at a picture of a 10-day-old embryo and then saying, what do you think this is going to look like as an adult? And the answer is, you have no idea. No idea at all what it's going to look like. And I can say that. This generation alpha maybe is going to end up being the AI generation. I don't know what somebody will finally name them, but they are going to have artificial intelligence as a normal part of their life from the beginning, in ways that everybody else is still adapting to, just in the same way that Gen Zers are digital natives with phones and everything. I think this Gen Alpha is going to be artificial intelligence natives, and we have no idea what that actually means in their life.
No, and even their careers, looking further ahead, robotics, things that we haven't even thought of. That's the fields they'll be working in. It's a whole new world.
How do you train somebody for something that doesn't exist yet? Well, that's an excellent question. And then, what pathway can you do for a job that's going to actually exist in 25 years or 20 years, or by the time you finish your degree, that hasn't become obsolete. So that's exciting challenges. But theologically, there's some incredible stuff that the Lord will do with all of that. I think probably like every technology, it will be used for evil and it will be used for good. And there will be opportunities for the gospel that we can't yet imagine if Jesus doesn't come back.
Even through COVID and the lockdown, I think at first I thought, wow, Satan has successfully shut every church down across the entire world. And yet as we began to pick ourselves up from that and reinvent new ways of doing ministry and education, my school that I teach at is in Houston while I live in Florida. And so there's a whole new world of education out there. And I think a lot of that was forced upon us through COVID, and we have managed to adapt to a degree as much as possible with both ministry and with education. So like you said, Satan can mean it for evil, but God can use it and turn it into good.
Absolutely. As Christian parents, there are many things we want to do to teach our kids about God and His love for us. But leading your family in faith can be overwhelming. What are the most important things to teach? Where do you even begin? I'm really excited to tell you about a great resource from Christian Parenting that will make teaching faith at home simple, engaging, and fun. Love God and Others is a 4-week family challenge to help you teach your kids the greatest commandment of all time: love God and love others. Each week, you'll focus on loving God with different aspects of who you are, and it includes a few pages on a portion of the Great Commandment to equip you for the week ahead, scriptures and points of truth for your family to reflect on together, and fun challenges to try with your family. This resource is an amazing opportunity for your family to grow closer to each other and to God as you learn about His steadfast love for you, and you learn to love Him with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. For more information and to get your copy, head over to cpgive.org. That's cpgive.org. Okay, Janine, in speaking to parents, and again, I understand we're on the front end and a lot of the lines are blurred between Z and Alpha. What are some things that you would coach moms and dads on, understanding this is a different generation? How does that affect parenting or even discipling of our little ones? Have you wrestled through any of those conclusions to this point?
I have through some. I think they're in a very difficult situation, and I think they realize it. I think they're crying out to the church for help.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the church knows how to help them yet. I don't think we have adjusted to the questions that these kids are asking, at least asking Google about.
Mm-hmm.
They can Google information about pornography in a way that's anonymous, and no one will ever know, and they can get answers to that, but what kind of answers are they getting? And I believe that the church needs to come alongside these parents. I think they need to equip the parents and encourage them by giving them training and information to answer those hard questions. The thing that scares me the most is that parents and kids are walking away from the church. They're saying that the church is irrelevant. They're saying that the church is hypocritical, and they're saying, I no longer believe. And that's scary to me. And they've become so, you've probably no doubt heard of tiger parenting and helicopter parenting.
Mm-hmm.
They're two extremes. It was funny, I was watching a TV show the other day about 10 different forms of parenting techniques and from all different backgrounds, and they were assessing how successful these parents were in terms of their kids performing certain tasks, and tiger and helicopters were in there, but that's two extremes. I know that for myself, I tended much towards tiger parenting under the fear that my kids weren't going to be successful. And then there are the others that hover over every decision and try to do their homework for them and make every decision for them. I think we need to find a balance with our parenting with these children, and come alongside with the church. And instead of they're finding the church irrelevant, I'm thinking to myself, how can the church be irrelevant when we have the answer to every question possible? And I just don't think the church is answering those questions. They're not transferring the Bible stories into real life application. And these kids are being indoctrinated with a secular worldview, and there's no absolutes. And I think we have to somehow try to keep these families connected, and they're so busy that because they see the church as not really helping, they go to other places to try and find the answers. So I come back to children's ministry and I say, it's great to teach the story of Noah and the ark. I love Bible stories, but instead of leaving it at that, we need to talk about how Noah felt when the entire community was laughing at him. How do you guys cope when kids at school laugh at you? Do you get bullied? What do you do? How do you help a friend who's being bullied? And actually talk about some of those issues that the kids are wrestling with right now, and help the parents as they try to disciple their kids without taking away their responsibility, but equipping them to do it.
That's really good. I think that there's a bigger picture issue. You mentioned parents are so busy, and I agree that that's true. I am in a really busy season right now as a parent, and it's like, I don't know how to get out of it. It'll end, sports season will end and everything, and this is not healthy and sustainable. And I understand plenty of parents get into that and never get out. But I also feel like churches have just owned that people and parents are going to be really busy. And so there has been a multi-decade, or at least last 10 years plus, conversation of, okay, people are really busy and they're really only going to give us 1 hour a week or maybe 2 hours a week at most. And so how do we have the most efficient, most meaningful, most powerful church services and church programs so that we can make disciples of everybody in an hour to an hour and a half a week. And I'll tell you, one of the things at our church is that we've just rejected that. Like, that is a false premise, and I don't think it's possible. I cannot make disciples in 60 minutes a week.
Yep.
And so, and what we see is that it's not just a matter that children need accurate and creative conveyance of information. They need real community, and they need their moms and dads to be in real community. And I think on a church level, like we have to commit that we are not just a place to go for an hour or even 2 hours a week to get our check off the list of singing songs to Jesus and some kind of lesson. The church has to be the community that you grow up in, and they have to see examples of, special needs kids who we love and take care of together. Why? Because they are valuable in God's sight. And we have to see, so-and-so really blew it, and we didn't throw them out. We love them back to Jesus. And I think that, I don't have a lot of answers for culture in general, but I do think one of the church answers is if you are thinking that you're going to find a church that in an hour a week communicates all of the stuff that your kid needs to know, and just because somebody said it in an accurate and creative way, that your kid's going to get it, and that's going to compete with the other 167 hours a week that culture is bombarding them with vomit, you've lost your child.
Absolutely.
So you have to commit to being the church, not just going to church services when youth sports and vacations and the weather don't prevent you from doing it. So I don't know how to get past that, to tell you the truth.
I got two things to say about that. When I was at my previous church, when I was actually the kids director, I remember talking about wanting to begin a midweek program to use it as another stepping stone to discipling these kids. And I was told that families are really busy. We don't want to overwhelm them with too many things. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what they should be getting overwhelmed with is their relationship with God. So I started it anyway. And I said, if not everyone comes, that's fine. But the ones that do come will have more time with them. That's the first thing. I don't think the churches should be cutting back because families are filling their lives with other things. The second thing is, I think more than anything, especially in this world of technology where children are engaged in social media, but they're very lonely, I think we need to really work on relationships with the kids, face-to-face relationships in the classes, not necessarily the teacher standing up the front, but sitting in circles with the kids, throwing out issues and letting them think through the answers for themselves instead of just regurgitating what we know, especially with preteens, third, fourth, fifth graders. This generation is very hands-on, very touchscreen, and they're very experiential, and we need to give them scenarios where they can actually think through, how do we cope with this, or how do we handle this? And then after we've done that, go and watch them play soccer. Invite them to ice cream, the whole class, and just sit and hang out with them to give them face-to-face contact with people. And if they're busy, that's because they're filling their lives with things that they think fulfill them. And we need to give them things that really will fulfill them, and help them begin to prioritize that.
Yeah. And I feel like it's not, we don't have to guilt anybody. You just have to offer them something better.
Yes.
I don't have to guilt you for not coming, but this is what I've seen in kids. At this point, because the children and the youth love the community that has developed at our church. They get upset if their youth sports is on Wednesday night. They get ticked off if there's some kind of event because they want to be, they want to be with their friends. Praise God. They want to be with friends of people whose parents love Jesus. And somewhere along the way, the kids start loving Jesus. I want that for my kids. And so I don't ever get mad that a child wants to come to church because he wants to be with his friends versus his particular holiness, because that's still great. They're still around the community of God. The other thing, Janine, just thinking through technology, I would just strongly recommend for every mom and dad, never give your child a piece of technology that you don't know how to control the filters and limits on. And understand that when you give them that piece of technology, maybe you understand how to control the filters and limits on it now, and you should put those on before you hand it to them. But they also have the hive mind of every child that they know to creatively come out with ways to get around that technology, and they will. Yeah. So it's not a one-time learning process for you as an adult. It's a constant learning process to be able to stay ahead of where they're going.
And teaching them that technology can be used for good. So one of the things I talk about in my book is, instead of necessarily standing up the front while you're teaching with a Bible in your hand, have a phone in your hand and read from your phone and say, look, here's the Bible here. Let's have a look and see on your phones. Can we put on a Bible app? And you can get all of the translations. You can have the Bible in your back pocket everywhere you go. So how can we use technology for good? What are some ways we can creatively help these kids? You know, if they've got a question about an issue, say, let's look it up on our phones right now and see if we can find the answer, and help them to learn what is good information and what is not so good information. Because once they get past the age of our safeguards, they're on their own, and they need to be able to navigate what they're accessing and know this is not so good, this is good. And I think we need to be teaching that in our homes and in our churches.
That's really good. Janine, we're obviously on the front end of understanding Gen Alpha, and we are tiptoeing in, even in this discussion, of what is known about them now. Tell me about the book that you wrote as you began to dive into it. Tell us what it's called, who's it primarily for, and then if somebody would like a copy of it, where should they go?
Sure. It's called When You See Fireflies. When you write a book, they always tell you don't be cryptic with the title, but mine is cryptic. This subtitle is Equipping Leaders and Parents to Minister Effectively to Generation Alpha. The title, where did it come from? My oldest daughter decided that she wanted to create the title for my book. She said, Mom, when we lived in Pennsylvania and we wanted to go outside and play, we would say to you, when do we have to come inside? And I would say, when you see fireflies. We had a backyard where they would swarm around, and the kids were engrossed in their playtime. And no matter what they were doing, they could see the little flickering lights, and they knew now it's time to come in, away from the dark. I said, bad things happen at night. Come inside where it's safe. These lights only flash for a short time. You need to watch them. So when you see them, come on inside. So the premise behind my book is we can give these kids signals to bring them inside, away from a very dark world. And so that's kind of where it's woven throughout it. It was primarily written at first for children's directors. It's a 275-page book. It's got a lot of research and information in it, but then it also branches out into more practical story telling things, and there's things in there for parents as well, about what kind of parent are you. How can you adjust your parenting? How is the church supposed to come alongside you and help you and equip you? It's due to be released. I'm being told mid-May. I don't have my hands on a copy yet. They're supposed to be sending it any day now. So we're right at the end of the publishing process. And then it will be available on my website, which is graceforkids.org. It's Grace, the number 4, and kids with a Z. I tried to get kids with an S, but somebody already had that domain name. So it's graceforkids.org. You'll be able to get it there. And if you want to sign up on the homepage, there's a 25-page ebook, which is a very brief summary of some of the findings that I had launching into my book. And you can download that for free. And that will give you access to my emails that will tell you when the book's available. But it'll be through Amazon and all of the regular places that you can buy books, as well as from my website.
Well, congratulations on that. And as this podcast is released, will be right about when your book is live. So if you're listening to this, you could probably pull your car over to the side of the road and order when you see fireflies before you even get home, and Amazon might beat you home. So, but Amazon's wonderful and convenient, but sometimes the author gets a little bit more money if you go to their website. And I feel like Jeff Bezos has plenty of money. I gave him some this morning before I came to work. So if you go to Grace for Kids, I bet Janine gets another 25 cents or so from that book title. So I would recommend that. So. Hey, thanks so much for coming on, and I look forward to having more dialogue with you as we learn more about Gen Alpha.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
Mm-hmm. As always, I want to thank you so much for listening to Let's Parent on Purpose this week, for sharing it with friends, and for subscribing, like buttoning, and all of the things that people do. Let's Parent on Purpose is a ministry of the 127 Project. It's listener supported. And if you want to be a part of producing this podcast, and then more than that, taking care of the orphan and at-risk around the world, you can do so by going to letsparentonpurpose.com/support or clicking the give button at the bottom of my Things for Thursday email that I send out. And we can be a part of transforming not just our families, but the uttermost parts of the world with the gospel of Jesus. Again, I want to thank you for listening. I want to remind you that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint. And we'll talk to you soon.